Hello, everyone, to our first episode with a guest, Jordan Leah from Deal Me Out. That is a long standing colleague and friend and activist in the safer gambling space. How are you doing today, Jordan?
I'm really good, thank you. Are you all right?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Good.
uh,
That's a very nice intro as well. That's always nice to hear.
Okay, we're trying our best. Finding our feet with this new podcast. We're very keen to interview the key voices, but everyone. So if you ever want to be here sitting with Duncan and I, anyone can drop us an email, and we'll try to accommodate as soon as we can. So Jordan, we know you, but many of the people that are listening to us or watching this video today will know you as well. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you got here? And a little bit about Deal Me Out.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Jordan Lee. I'm from North Wales. I had a quite debilitating gambling addiction for between 10 and 12 years. I started gambling as a child. So I started gambling when I was 14. I was gambling with in-game currencies in games like RuneScape and sort of going on to third-party websites and playing roulette and things like that on those. By the time I was 18, I was already in pretty real trouble, really. So I started playing online from probably about 21. I gambled reasonably responsibly actually online for the first couple of years. It wasn't something that I was always a cash kind of person. I was paid in cash. I bank, money in the bank wasn't really something that excited me too much. But then I found poker, which was my first love, really. That was something that I first started playing in pubs, and then I started playing quite profitably, actually, as a cash player in casinos. But over time, the more and more time I spent in casinos, I couldn't, walk out without hitting the roulette or the blackjack tables. So I went through a bit of a spiral. I tried to move to Australia to get away from my gambling addiction and ended up homeless in Australia for a number of weeks. Yeah, that was it's not something everyone knows. But I made a very silly mistake at that point. My parents bailed me out. And while I was sitting in the airport, I've still got the letters to this day. I wrote myself a little letter saying how I was going to be a professional poker player and I was going to take it really seriously and I was going to put all my time and efforts into it. And that didn't go very well. I ended up committing fraud and went through the criminal justice system in certainly 2012. And I really, really struggled during that process. It took 3 years to actually be sentenced. I was very lucky that I got a suspended sentence in the end. The judge actually sent me down to the cells. She actually did tell me I was going to prison to give me a bit of a shock, I think. But she sent me down there, and I was sitting next to the person next to me was had just been charged for rape, and he was shouting things. I mean, I wouldn't actually, it's probably not the right place to say it, but he was shouting some very volatile things in the cell next to me. And it kind of really put life into perspective. I've just watched my mum and dad crying in the in the courtroom, and now there's this bloke who I'm now on par with. I'd always viewed myself as a reasonably decent person. I'd committed a terrible offence, but I hadn't really put it into, I hadn't really swallowed that information, that feeling until I was sitting in that cell. And then the guard, I guess you'd call him, called me up and said, "Our judge wants to see you." And she said, "I'm going to give you one more chance, one more chance to turn your life around." And that was, you'd think, the wake-up call I needed. But it went on another couple of years. after that until I really kind of got myself into a good place. And I was sitting in a casino. I'd lost pretty much everything, and it wasn't my usual casino. It was one I went to when I was a little bit broke, and I was in a really bad way. And I think the dealer, the poker dealer, I think they'd kind of noticed the change in me, and they pulled me aside. The management team said, "I think you've got a gambling addiction." And I just broke down, completely broke down. And I called my partner and I said, "Can you come pick me up?" And I mean, I was in Manchester; it's a good 2 hours away. And she said, you gambling?" I said, "Yes." She came and picked me up, and she kind of listened to me. Usually there'd been a bit of a shouting if I'd gambled. She's very not anti-gambling, that's probably the wrong word to use. There'd been a lot of harm, I guess. So she was always very disappointed in me when I did gamble. It was very bingy, so everything would go. And yeah, so she just listened to me, and she listened to how I was feeling. I think she saw I was at the end of my tether with it, and I got some help at that point. I did struggle with some black market usage during that time as I signed up to GamStop and other things. I did spend money on the black market, but over time I started to really understand what gambling addiction was and research and put time and effort into my recovery. I met a lot of people in this space. Started watching podcasts. That was a big thing for me. Watching podcasts and kind of immersing myself in that kind of recovery journey. And since then, it's touch wood, been a pretty good journey. We started Deal Me Out in 2019. I started going and delivering a couple of workshops into schools. Just thought, wow, that'd be a really good thing to do. Not realizing there was a few others already doing it. COVID hit. I was actually running a pub in Chester, and I just taken on the lease. And that was in the February, so something around that. So a month later, COVID hit, and they closed all the pubs down. So I managed to get out of that, and thought, right, well, I've got no job, no nothing, and COVID's hit, so we're all locked down, and I'll give it a go. And we got very fortunate, and the Gambling Commission accepted a regulatory settlement application. We delivered quite an extensive education program in Wales with 30% Welsh language usage. And yeah, it's rest is history, I guess. We deliver kind of support stuff. We work with social prescribers in GP surgeries now in the local area. So they refer people into our service, and then we kind of triage them and signpost to whichever is the appropriate kind of UK-based service. We have Next Gen, which is a work experience program, and we're doing a lot on the black market at the moment. That's something we're really passionate about. That's especially with my kind of history from gaming and that kind of side, and the influencer side. I still really enjoy my content creators now. So it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I see as the pathway that I took into gambling, which was not particularly common back then, but is becoming more and more commonplace in today's society.
That's really interesting, Jordan. Is anybody else getting that echo? No, is it just
yes,
me?
I can get the echo from you, Duncan.
No, I'm not getting any echo now. No, that's really interesting, Jordan. The first thing that strikes me, and before we go any further, look, please feel free to just close down anything. Don't answer anything you're not comfortable with answering.
No.
This is quite delicate area to discuss. But the first observation I'd make is your pathway in through your early teenage years and gambling with in-game currencies is surprising. Even to me, who's been working in the gambling space since the mid 2000s, I wasn't aware in-game currencies were being gambled that early. I thought that was a relatively new phenomenon, but from what you're describing, that must have been happening in the early 2010s.
Yeah. I mean, so it was. I mean, 2005 that I was doing it, and this is again, it is quite surprising because websites for operators were only just becoming available around that time. Apps on phones weren't really a thing. So yeah, it is surprising, and there are a number of games. So RuneScape was the one I was playing, and they had really big problems with dealing with that issue, particularly around 2007 to 2010. That gambling was rife within that game, and you could actually gamble within the game itself. It wasn't a feature. It's not the game's problem. And we're seeing this now with Roblox. It's not necessarily their problem. It's a peer-to-peer thing. It's a player-to-player thing. And people will use whatever mechanisms to gamble within games. If there is a currency that you can trade, people will find ways to gamble. And in the very early elements so from 13, 14, I was doing just player versus player gambling, where I would risk my, coins versus your coins in a fight, and whichever person won would take the coins. It is gambling, but it's a very kind of short form of gambling. But it did move on to something which is more prominent, which is online casinos with that currency.
I wanted to ask you, because something that I see when I see the stats, all of that high percentage of young people gamble, and I always have seen this type of mechanics. Look, this is gambling, but we hear sometimes from regulators and all the video game industry. Oh no, this is not gambling. It's something a bit shocking. It's like, look, it's gambling. I have worked for a very long time in the industry, and I know what gambling looks like. It's
I think everybody does know what gambling looks like. It's somewhat like the sweepstakes justifications that have been used widely in the US and have spread elsewhere in recent times. Just because you've found a loophole that means it doesn't qualify by the technical legal definition of gambling doesn't mean the person isn't risking something of value in an effort to win something of value, which is the core psychological mechanism of gambling. I question whether we can say that the game provider isn't responsible for it. Simply, I understand they're just providing the peer-to-peer, but if that peer-to-peer is facilitating young people gambling, it's a different thing when it's adults, but your game is actively targeting people who are under the legal age of gambling, and if your mechanism facilitates that gambling, you have to hold some responsibility, and you have to start building in protections to prevent this. I mean, if eBay can stop you exchanging email addresses with buyers and sellers automatically, then these games can build in protections that can stop you transacting if there have been communications that suggest gambling.
Well, here's the problem that they face. So they did make a couple of attempts to do this. So I'm going from memory here. So by all means, do your own research as to the time frames and things. But let's go for perhaps 2009. Around that period of time, they eliminated the ability to trade or to have, or you couldn't access any kind of currency within the game. You just had to build your own. There was no trade feature. You couldn't kill other players in the PvP section and take their stuff anymore. They took it out of the game. But what that did, and this is where it's such a brilliant thing, the regulation side is what I'm so passionate about and so interested in it, because it happened around this time. All the players left. They just stopped playing. And they only came back when they removed those regulations, if you will, those restrictions. Yeah. They only came back at that point because it took away elements of the game that people actually enjoyed, and one of the things that they most enjoyed. So it almost killed the game. And what the reason that they did this, that they enforced this, was the credit card providers. There were so many chargebacks on cards from children who'd used their parents' cards that the card providers went to them and said, we won't allow you to use Visa or MasterCard, whatever it was. We won't allow you to do that anymore if you don't get on top of this. And it was to do with there were bots in the account in the game that were farming the gold, and then they were selling that to the people who were gambling, basically. So they had to do something. They tried to do something. It just killed the game, and it honestly, no one was playing it anymore. When they brought it back in, obviously some of the players came back. It never fully recovered, but some of the players came back. But then they had another feature in it called they called it the Sand Casino. The players do. It's called the Jewel Arena. But honestly, I would say that is responsible for a lot of young people in the UK's gambling addictions. And I don't mean that in a. I'm not trying to be scaremonger within that. I honestly, and if you actually look at YouTube, there's a lot of videos on this from very prominent content creators who have said, how was this legal? How was this legal? You could buy currency, you could stake against other players, and you could sell it back. It wasn't a game feature. Again, there was a black market for it. And it was so prominent within the game that probably 30, 40% of the players were doing it. And you had millions and millions of accounts. But it was the thing that people enjoyed about it. It became a gambling game, basically, and that's not how they wanted it to be played. But it's what they removed.
Yeah, and and excuse me, I'm not a gamer. This conversation's actually making me curious to speak to my brother, who was a gamer from a very young age, and see what his experience of this type of mechanic has been. But it leads me to think that you need to keep some mechanic there that pleases the player. Otherwise, you create a black market. You need to deliver the experience that players want, but you still need to build in features that prevent underagers from gambling. And that's what I'm saying. It's been a while since I've used eBay, but certainly if you try and send somebody an email address within a message, it just won't let you send. Even if you space it out, or you type it out, the start, and you type and then it won't send. Any of the common ways of trying to mask that you're communicating your email address, eBay automatically prevent. Now, if you have age verification on a game and then your bot identifies that a player is saying something like wager or bet or compete for this gold coin, there's got to be ways of automatically restricting. And
they have that.
I don't believe that we, with all the smarts in the world, we can't find solutions to these things that allow us to deliver the product but minimize the harm.
You're right. They do have those features within the game. Go on, Pedro. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm a bit curious, when you were talking a little bit about your story, you sort of mentioned that you end up committing fraud. Would you mind to tell us what happened? How do you got there?
I stole a friend's credit card and used their credit card, basically. It turned up in the post, and I'd been using his card on an online account, which he was aware of, and it was fully, okay. And then the card got missing. He lost it or something, so he got a new one. He'd gone away for a week. The card had turned up. I knew he was getting one, so I thought, well, he won't mind. I'll deposit. I'll use it. I'll send him the money. Give him the cash when he comes home. That sort of stuff. But I didn't. I spent far too much, and I wasn't able to pay it back. And then when he came back, he found out the card had, you know, been used, and he came, you know, he spoke to me about it first. I said, right, I'll go get you the money as soon as I can. And unfortunately, I think the trust was breached, and I think it was New Year's Day. In fact, it was New Year's Day, and he came up the pathway in the house, and I didn't realise the police were behind him, and I pulled a finger up at him as he was coming through in a jokey way, as we often would. So that didn't endear me to the police very much. And they came through the door. I was watching Catch Me If You Can, if you would believe that, the film about Leonardo DiCaprio and the fraud. That's what I was watching on TV. And it was. I mean, it's something that I'm probably still not over. If that makes, I'm probably. I don't think I've quite kind of forgiven myself for that yet. It's something that I don't think will actually leave me for a very long time. It's something that I'm incredibly embarrassed about. It was a very close friend, and something that I'm deeply embarrassed about.
And
I can see in the way you're talking how raw that is for you.
Yeah.
And how because you said that you almost got a suspended sentence for using.
Yeah, I mean, back in those days, it was a bit different to how it is now. It was a relatively low amount of money, to be honest. It was, it wasn't the sort of £100,000 you hear about now. It was a very young person's credit card worth of money. You know, you're talking £1,000, £2,000, which is still a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. I'm not belittling that at all. And it was over a short period of time, not a long period, but. So I was given an 18-month suspended sentence in the end. That was my sentence. It was, I mean, it was something that I really appreciated, but I think there was the process of being on bail to actually going to court was over 3 years. So I think it would be 2015 that I actually went to court. And for those 3 years, they don't contact you at all. You're just, is it over? Are they forgotten? Is it? Yeah, but you rebuild your life. And this is the thing, I got a new partner, and, I'd rebuilt that life. I was doing football coaching. I'd got a job, and I kind of thought it was over, I'll be honest. Or you hoped it was over. You hoped it had been forgotten about. And then you get a letter in the post, and honestly, the feeling when I got that through was I can still feel it. And when I go through Chester past the courtroom, I feel sick. It just makes me, and I think that's a good thing. Actually, I think it constantly reminds me as I go past that you don't want to be here again. You don't want to be in this position again. You know, that's the lowest you've ever been. But I think what courts need to understand is that 3 years that you're on that process, I was still gambling. I hadn't really considered that I was a gambling addict. I thought I'd just stolen money to gamble with. It was more, I felt like I was just a bad person than I was at that point a gambling addict. And obviously I lost all my friends as well, because it was the friend group. So I was very isolated, and you're just kind of left to your own device. Yes, to build your life back together, and you do, but also it was a very worrying time. There's a lot of trauma involved there. I'm sure some people aren't bothered by committing crime and can just kind of bounce to it, but most people aren't like that, and you do have severe guilt. You don't sleep, you don't eat properly. Your life just goes to a mess, and I mean, it's not like I'm the person people should feel sorry for in this situation. It's the victim of the offence, but I still have to go through what the impact is on the court process.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit. You're entirely right. The victim is an important player and an important piece in the narrative, but that doesn't diminish the trauma you've experienced.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think it is traumatic, and it hurts. The whole process hurts, and my partner at the time, I went into the courtroom again. This sounds like I'm trying to make people feel sorry for me, but it just kind of goes through and I think it's important for the affected other side as well. So we hadn't had a great relationship in the build up to the court appearance. So it was very difficult. She had 2 children that she had to be, present for, and we hadn't been together very long. And I went into the courtroom. I also had a very close personal friend as well, who the same thing happened to. I went into the courtroom, got my suspended sentence, and I phoned them. When I came out, they didn't answer the phone. None of them answered the phone. They just kind of were waiting for me to go to prison to end the relationships. Whether that be a romantic relationship or a friend relationship. They were both waiting for that, and that hit me hard when I came out. And I think that's one of the reasons I struggled to stop gambling. I think I was too hurt, and I lost pretty much everyone in my life at that point. And it's hard to kind of bounce back very quickly, I think.
Jordan, because I realized that I never heard your story. I've heard a lot of stories from a lot of life experience, and it's a bit like the little guy suffering harm. You say, oh, I stole 2K on a card that came through the post. Normally, the stories that you hear is, oh, I stole, I defrauded hundreds of thousands, then I did this, then, and sometimes it feels a bit like when you have, I don't know, like in your past, in my past stuff, and they get like these overblown, really curated stories, you're dealing with the everyday Joe, like it could be someone like you that is using someone else's card, depositing 500 quid. Oh well, that's you don't even think that you can go to jail, or you can be 3 years in limbo because of that. Always everybody's listening to the. It feels a bit like sometimes they're measuring. Oh, how much you stole? 150. Oh, I stole 1,000,000.
I agree, and I think that there's a dynamic in this that isn't helping us as a sector, because the press, naturally, they want the big numbers, because the big numbers are what drives clicks, and clicks are how they make their money. The regulators focus on the higher value cases, just because of the nature of the higher value. But when we don't talk and hear about the experiences that are, and I don't mean this to be in any way belittling, but mundane in their nature. They are smaller, they're more routine. What we're stopping is other people. You've just been talking, Jordan, about having done this, but still not feeling like you had a gambling addiction. And how many other people have done something similar, and it maybe hasn't been escalated to the police, and they still don't consider themselves to be impacted by gambling harm, because that's just not how they see themselves. And all the stories they're seeing everywhere else are talking about huge sums of money, and that doesn't match their experience. So we're denying a context that's important for allowing people to understand what gambling harm is.
You're 100% correct. And you know what? That was a lesson I learned very quickly. So I have, if you look at the turnover of my betting accounts and how much I've gambled, it is very significant. You're talking, £500,000 worth of gambling. And that is primarily the later end of when I actually had some money come through and I had some inheritance and stuff like that. So that's where that's come from. But then Mark, our old head of education, when he started, that was one of the things he said to me. He said, you need to be really careful here because his story is not that huge, vast, hundreds of thousands of pounds. And I thought that was really important to kind of discuss. Oh, £500,000. And because, and as you said, it has clicks, it has some shock factor. Whereas actually, when he came in, I can't remember actually the amount of money he's lost, but let's call it £20,000 over time. He's my age, similar kind of thing, but that's really important. That if he was losing £500 a month, it was still unaffordable, and it was still gambling addiction. And it's also something that people can relate to in the community. There are so many people in the community that are losing £500 a month that can't afford to do that, who would think, well, I mean, if he was losing $500,000, I'm not that bad. I've not got I might have a little bit of a problem, but not a big problem. Whereas actually they might be going through exactly the same thing. It's just the fact that I had access to inheritance and they haven't at this point. And that's a really important learning thing for me when I was taught by Mark.
I always think of this, and I've spoken about it a few times, but the value of money is contextual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? £100 to me, if it goes missing from my wallet, it's not going to change my life. It's an inconvenience. It's an annoyance. To somebody who's wealthier than me, they may not even notice £100 missing. To somebody who's poorer than me, £100 missing might mean they can't afford to put food on the table, or they can't afford to pay their rent. The value of the same amount of currency is different depending on your personal circumstances. And when we only focus our reporting about gambling harm on these super high figures, we stop people gaining that contextual reference.
Yes.
I wanted also to ask you a little bit about, because all these things happen and then you were cut off. It's a bit like, you don't have friends, you don't have anyone. The only sort of relationship that you still have, is with gambling. Is the
and that's a big thing. So what I did for much of the 3 years that I was on bail, but certainly the next 2 years, I didn't really leave the house. So I lived with my dad. I'd moved back in with him after the court appearance, and I was so depressed. But I just couldn't leave the house. I really, really couldn't. So you're probably looking at 5 years where, yes, I would go out to my partners and things like that, and work and stuff in the 3 years. But all the rest of the time, I was just in my house, in my bedroom, eating crisps and drinking pop, and gambling and just watching content, basically. And then after the court appearance, I don't think I left the house for a year and a half. Genuinely. No, sorry, that's wrong. I was going to the casino, and that's what I was going to come to. So if I wasn't in the house, I was in the casino. And the reason that I think I really struggled to remove myself was when I walked down that escalator into the card room, half the card room went, "Hey, it's George." And that's a feeling I wasn't getting anywhere else. I'd kind of created a bit of a persona there. They obviously didn't know about the fraud. They thought, I was quite a high net worth individual. I was always very happy and jovial, and you would never have known what I was actually going through. And the reactions I used to get were that of, these are my friends. These are the people that I want to spend time with, the community. And that was so important for me in that time. And what I will say that there were some positives in that, but it was also a crutch for me in that I wasn't
facilitating.
Yes, facilitating. And I wasn't building relationships at home. I can't imagine what it'd have been like for my dad. I can't remember. I've kind of pushed it out. I mean, he must have been at the end of his tether with me. He couldn't get me out of the house to go to work or anything, but I was fine to go to the casino. And I can't even remember where I was getting the money from, to be honest, at that time. He was probably giving me money. I honestly can't remember how I was accessing money.
Because I'm thinking, how many young people sometimes maybe in a situation, okay, I feel a bit stuck. I'm at home, living with my dad, and the only place where they get, a sense of community is gaming or gambling,
online gaming.
and it's something that, okay, would have been, I don't know, great, if, okay, you get the scared, and you get a bit of forgiveness from your old friends, community, something, or you had the possibility of sorting things out and sort of being, you know, welcome back to the tribe rather than being ostracized.
But unfortunately, especially in smaller communities, you're stuck with that stigma. And this was so. I was coaching a kids' football team, and this is genuinely true. I was very open and honest about it, and I told them throughout the process what was going on. I was kind of running the club basically, and it got to the point where they actually accused me of taking equipment from the club, which wasn't actually true. I'm very open about things that I've done. They actually accused me of taking some equipment from the club, which I hadn't done. I still had it. It was just in the car that we'd taken to a game one day, and it just happened to be still with me, and hadn't given it back yet. And they came and picked it up, but it caused that kind of caused a lot of suspicion, a lot of, well, leopard doesn't change its spots kind of thing. And honestly, to this day, I can still hear it. I know that these things still go on. There are people in my life who will, have people will ask questions or stuff about me. And when I first got with my partner, actually, my current partner, we've been together for going on 9 years now. When she was in work, one of her colleagues came up to her and said, "I just want to tell you, do you know this about?" And she said, "Yeah, he told me like on the first date. It was something he mentioned to me." But people kind of just have that, I guess, protective, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but what it certainly doesn't do is aid people's recovery when you're when you know that people around the corner are going to try and pull you back down a little bit, and that is a societal problem. I think people feel they're trying to do a good thing, but people don't forget, and no matter what you do, people won't forget. You just have to be okay with it and look to make as much impact as you can into your own community so that you can kind of, I suppose, make up for some of the things you've done is one of the things, and for the community, but also for yourself. And so I can walk into it, and I don't care now if people are whispering behind my back. It's absolutely fine. I've gone out and done enough good stuff in our community and helped enough people that I can feel like I'm a valuable member to our society. And it took a long time to get there, but that's how I feel now. And I could care less what people say behind your back.
Have you ever spoken again with that friend that reported you to the police?
No, and I often think about this, and it's something that I've never really talked about this, to be honest. I would have liked to, but I think it's got to the point where I just have to respect that he probably doesn't want to, and I think that that's his right not to. So therefore, why is my own feelings trump the victim's feelings?
You're not alone in that. There are. I'm not going to go into great detail, but there are people in my life, in my past, who I owe an apology to, and in my older age, I know I owe an apology to. But we're so far past the mark now that who's the apology really for? Is it to make them feel better, or is it to make me feel better?
Yeah.
And if it's to make me feel better, then it's
not the right thing.
Not to be engaged with. Now,
yeah,
you're right. We've spoken a lot about the past.
Yeah,
but I'd like to ask some questions about the present. Now, I think, did you say it's 9 years that you've been without gambling? Or have I made that figure up?
Around that, yeah, with a hiccup here or there in the past, but yeah, around that sort of time.
So could you speak a little about maybe what you feel is triggering in your life, what's dangerous in your life, and what behaviours, patterns you've engaged to try and mitigate and protect yourself?
Yeah. So, do you know what? I had a recent. I would never have got through a recent sort of change in my life if it hadn't been for a number of people, I guess. But also, so looking at when you take recovery, for example, I was in, a really good recovery, and I never thought gambling would even enter my mind. And it didn't really. It's not something that I didn't go out and spend 10 grand. I didn't go out and gamble. It was a case of it was there, and I felt it, and I felt the feelings come back. And it was only about a year ago. My dad was diagnosed with cancer, and he'd lent Deal Me Out quite a lot of money when we were struggling, and he hadn't told me that he had stage 4 head and neck cancer. So when we got into a really bad financial position at Deal Me Out, we were left just I didn't want to close and everything because I wanted to keep moving, but also I felt there was a bit of overhead because I didn't know that my dad was very ill. There was also some fallouts, with things. The business was really struggling, and I also found out that my partner was pregnant. So we, how the hell am I going to pay for this baby? I can't keep the business running. We were just in such a bad place, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn to. And this is somewhere, Duncan was very, very helpful in this, and we spoke at great length at the time, and he's very supportive and helped me through a lot. And this is where being able to kind of communicate and talk about what you're going through and accept help when it's there as well, and not just kind of hermit yourself and try and do everything yourself. But all those things combined were within like 2 weeks of each other. It was honestly, it was like a sledgehammer hit you, and you didn't know which way to look because you didn't know where the next one was coming from. I struggled badly during that time, and that I'm honestly the fact that I didn't just go and gamble every day is a mystery to me. I don't know how I kind of didn't go and do it because all the feelings were there. Everything within me was I need something to pursue this because I can't think about what's going on in my life. But I was aware of that, and I think that was a big thing for me. I was aware of the feelings, and I was aware of why I was feeling them, and I was able to take some pride in the fact that I recognized them and that I could go and speak to other people. I spoke to a couple of people in our sector about the way I was feeling, and they were very supportive. And I spoke to my family and things like that, and we just got through it. We just kind of worked our way through it. I took a break as well. I just took a break from everything, and I went a bit quiet, to be honest with you. I probably spent like a week where I didn't reply to any messages that were work related. I just took a week off work and and moved forward. It was a very sad time. We lost quite a lot of the staff because funding became very difficult for our sector. And yeah, it wasn't nice, but I got through it, and that was with a little help from your friends, as the old saying goes. You just get through it, and as long as you can recognize what you're feeling and you can be okay with it and recognize that you'll be okay, you're probably onto a good start. There were some changes that I had to make, and I did start to notice that I became very irritable with my partner, with other people. I suppose that's generic of whenever anyone's going through, if anyone was going through a job loss, they'll put that, a parent being diagnosed with cancer and money troubles, you're going to be a bit irritable. So I recognized that, and I recognized that my decision making was a bit erratic. And I did go to the GP, and I went on to sertraline for depression, basically. I didn't actually continue with it because I felt I was actually okay. But I just kind of went and really tried to make sure that I took all precautions, basically. But yeah, that was short lived. We managed to get through it, but just as an interesting point of view, people with lived experience, I don't think it ever fully goes. You're still susceptible to those challenges in life, and understanding how to move forward and mitigate those is key to long-term recovery, I think.
It seems like it's difficult. Did you ever had any staff at Deal Me Out that relapsed? Come to you, Jordan. So
Not at the time that they were employed with us. I know that when this happened, when we struggled, that was put forward to me that job losses were triggering. I won't go into any more detail than that, but that is something which is a great cause of pain for me.
Yeah.
Jordan, I lived through that particular period. BetBlocker lived through that particular period as well, and I understand how vulnerable you feel around that and how bad that made you feel, but that the responsibility for the lack of funding that occurred around 2 years ago wasn't on you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've spoken about this before, and I think there were things that I could have done, and that there were things that that there were learning curves in business, and you will always I'm not saying they were mistakes. These are just decisions you make, and you did we need 10 staff very early on? Probably not. When the going was good, we should probably have released people earlier than we did. We tried to kind of put our head in the sand and really move forward. And I could have probably been, but it's important, I think, to look back and see where, just one for personal development, but also for the organisation to look at what you could have done differently, and see how we we're not going to make these mistakes again. And I will wear the scars of those battles going forward, and they do still hurt, but you just have to move forward with it.
That's I would say external to the addiction issue overall, and I've been there. I've run a business, and I've run a business where we've had to let people go, and there've been people that I deeply care for, and I've made. I look back on that and I can see the mistakes I made.
Yeah,
and there's some decisions I would describe as mistakes, and there are some that I would describe as. I mean, it's only with the benefit of hindsight that they become mistakes, because perhaps, for instance, you're waiting for more funding to come through, and it then becomes not a great choice of term, but a gamble, because you're waiting for that funding to come through, and if you let people go because you may not get the funding, and you do get the funding, those people are still gone and they've left. And if you don't let people go and you don't get the funding, then things become difficult. There's not a good. You need to know the outcome before the decision becomes good or bad.
That's true. And one of the things we had at the time is we did have 2 invoices that were long-term invoices that just hadn't landed. So we were constantly waiting for them to land. And so we were coming to every pay run and we were going, where's this money? It hasn't landed yet. And then we were saying, well, what can we do? So I took out personal loans. So I took out £20,000. We had about 25 grand a month wage bill, somewhere around that. So I paid it 1 month. My dad paid it the other. Other people, I mean, Duncan, you'll know more than anyone, have helped us out to get through it while we were waiting for those invoices. The issue was 2 of those invoices didn't land. They never landed. And we were left with that huge black hole. And, for my dad and me, we just kind of went, all right, well, it is what it is. We made that decision and we've become okay with it. We're not going to get that back, but we're happy that deal out's still going, and we're fine with that. But yeah, so that is something that I think was difficult, and you can't, or as you said, there are mistakes, and there are things that you can't control, and that was one of the things we couldn't control. We had to make a decision as to, this money's due in. When's it going to be in? Do we just keep keeping people on and keeping people in employment until it lands, or do we let them go and then rehire, a month later when they do land? And that's a difficult call to make, a very difficult call to make.
Shall we move on a little bit to the future? Be like us, we're, on the pre-levy, for real stages. There's, so what's going to happen?
That's $1 million question, isn't it? I do think it's going to be a challenging period of time going forward. I think we're all aware that there's going to be a difficult period moving forward in the UK. There are going to have to be decisions everyone's going to have to make, and I'm a big proponent of independence of all parties. I think that an organisation should be entirely independent of everybody and should be able to make decisions independent of everybody. I don't feel that we have the ability to do that anymore, which adds in a lot of questions about how organisations are going to be funded going forward. I've got a lot of questions and not a lot of answers at this stage, I think, about what the levy's going to look like. We're still waiting on the Prevention Commissioner. I think we're all pretty set on who it's going to be, but it doesn't look great for our organisation going forward. Is where I would place my hat, if you will.
Okay, Duncan, what do you think? What are your? So I know that you haven't brought your crystal ball today, but if you had to make a little Duncan prediction.
I'm a professional fencer. I'm a dispute mediator. I like to sit in the middle. Unfortunately, in this conversation, I sit more on the cynical side. I think things are more likely to turn out negatively, but I would leave the door open to some positivity. Certainly, the news today. Jordan managed to get I can't remember the exact name, the Greater Manchester
Combined Authority
to remove what was extremely I would say close to prejudicial wording with the intent of discouraging people from using services because they received funding from the industry. I think that was deeply unhelpful, but the fact that this authority has changed its position suggests a softening of stances, and I hope that is indicative of what is to come, and that we're going to get a more reasonable and open and cooperative dialogue going forward. However, my concerns right now are that the third sector isn't meant to do the same job as the health service. And the third sector is meant to be more agile. We are meant to be less burdened by bureaucracy and able to respond to emerging problems faster than the necessarily bureaucratic structures that our health service provides. And what I'm concerned about right now is that the levy, rather than supporting the third sector for what the third sector is, the levy is going to look to nationalise the third sector and bring it all under the control of the National Health Service. And we're going to face a challenging lack of manoeuvrability because everything has to be checked and double checked and overseen and quality assured. We're going to spend a lot of the levy, perhaps more than we've actually gained in funding, overseeing the spending of the rest of the money, and we're actually going to end up delivering a poorer service.
Because something that still a bit puzzled is like, okay, like many organizations have been stigmatized for following the rules. Like the Gambling Commission set the red system. For charities, organizations to access funding, and the organization that apply to be on the red list, that then you are, and I felt a bit like disappointed with the GC not to come out then and say, look, that was the best that we can do at the time, but it feels a bit like they have washed their hands, and it's not my problem anymore. And I just feel a bit, this is a bit, I don't know, unfair.
Yeah, they have washed their hands with it, and so the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, it's the levy has been, as long as I've been in this space, I've been involved in the kind of policy. But I mean, not a lot of people will know this. So when I first came into the space, I was quite aligned with the more prohibitionist side, if you will, and I was a bit angry when I came in, and I was a bit frustrated with operators, and I didn't really understand the sector, to be honest with you. I just kind of came into it, didn't understand how it worked, and was a bit like all of the rest of them. And I became very aware very early on that the levy was the key policy. And it was, so what was said to me was, we need to get Gamble Aware out of this picture. That's the key, the sole reason for the levy. That was the huge selling point for the levy at the start. I think that's changed now. I think some of those organisations are a little bit more open to Gamble Aware, but it was always the big thing. They didn't really care about any of the other policies. It was all about the levy and about bringing the power from the sector as is and into the public health-led organisations. There was a fissure in in how myself and a few others viewed what was going on. We were very, very frustrated with the way that the sector was being perceived. I mean, it was language like the gambling industry is teaching kids to gamble, and they were meaning organisations like Deal Me Out, like Epic Risk Management and YGAM, and that was really unhelpful and something that I was dead fastly against. It was something I couldn't support. So there were a lot of people who kind of pulled away at that point, and it caused a big crack in the lived experience community. Most of them are working within the sector. And if you actually look at the posts from the more, again, I use the word prohibitionist, use whichever one you want, but those organizations, if you actually look at the engagement they get on social media now, it's not from people with lived experience particularly. It's not the same people that they had really supporting them in 2020 or 2019. It has moved, and those people are now very supportive of our sector. So the politics of it is very, very unstable and confusing. And the levy has been the crux of that. It's been very volatile. and it's all about power and control. And unfortunately, I think we lost that battle.
Yeah, I would temper a little the criticism of the Gambling Commission, and that certainly, if we look recently, I think back to Tim Miller's speech at the Gamble Aware conference just at the end of last year. He was made very clear he was speaking about the issues we're discussing right now, this exclusionary polarization where one side is maneuvering to close down the voice of the other. He was very much speaking against that, and that was good to hear. I was really pleased to hear that. I would speak in defense of Gamble Aware. I do understand why many organizations are very frustrated with Gamble Aware. But Gamble Aware are the authority figure and have been the authority figure. And the problem with being the authority figure, and I'm talking from the background of a dispute mediator, where ultimately I have to review the case and decide one party or the other is right, and somebody's always going to walk away feeling that wasn't fair to me. In fact, the fairest decisions that you make are the decisions where nobody walks away feeling it was fair to them. Gamble Aware were put into a role where they were always going to cause friction with other organizations, organizations that were applying to them for funding. They could never keep everybody happy. And I think this has been a little bit of a mistake on the part of a lot of the organizations in the third sector, thinking that if we could remove Gamble Aware, then all the problems go away. No, if we remove Gamble Aware, all that happens is another body, another organization has to be set up to fulfill the same role, and you are going to be exactly as frustrated with that new organization as you were with Gamble Aware. That's just the nature of the structure of funding and the fact that there is not an unlimited pot where everybody can get everything they want. So yeah, I'll probably make myself very unpopular in the third sector saying this, but I am not as critical of Gamble Aware as a lot.
No, I mean, I've said my piece with Gambler in the past. I had an article that went out in 2020 in SBC, and Zoe gave me a right of reply and a bit of a slap across the face, I think, within the reply. But fair enough. That was she defended Gamble Aware, and I think that was what she needed to do, and we had really good conversations from that, and I think she's done some good work over there. So the frustrations people have with Gamble, I think you should be able to have, you should be able to speak about them. You should be able to talk about them as a commissioner and how they're doing, whether you think it's great or not. That's a good conversation. But to question the ethics and stuff, I mean, you and we all know the ethics is nonsense. That it's complete.
Well, it's not just that. Some of the organizations with the loudest voices on the prohibitionary side of things ultimately received a lot of funding from the industry.
Yeah,
it's just further back. It's a new thing that they've taken this position of no organization that's received funding from the industry should be allowed to access the levy. And frankly, my personal opinion on that is it's not about the ethics of receiving funding from the industry. It's about shutting out competition from receiving funding. And that's very problematic.
Jordan, you are setting up a conference in a couple of months. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're doing. We've just done a research proposal on the black market. and something that we're going to be, as we've been saying, is going to be coming out soon for about 3 months, but it's coming out soon. And we're going to be delivering a conference off the back end of that on March 3rd in Manchester. And it's got some great panelists and some people in this podcast included who will add great value on that. We're really concerned about the black market. That's something that I've had that experience, so I've used it, but also I came into gambling through what would be black market gambling and gambling within gaming and things like that. It's a niche, or was a niche way in, but it's becoming more and more problematic. It's becoming more and more commonplace with young people. One of the things, I'm happy to share this on here, but one of the things that we found was children in that we evaluated within our workshops had a higher understanding and prevalence of stake.com than they did of Bet365. And that has to be shocking to everybody. I think it has to be something that we wake up and go, oh, hold on. So children actually recognize the branding of stake, but they're not so, they don't report, to know who Bet365 are so often. And that comes back to a huge push in marketing from stake.com, and we can argue till the cows come home whether it's black market, whether it's not. I mean, I just take a very black and white view and say it is. Well, their global stuff, but it's to do with content creators and streamers, and that's where people are watching them, and we see a lot of variety streamers. So people who usually stream gaming, so they might be streaming Counter-Strike one day and they might have 10 million followers, but then they may decide to do a gambling stream the next day. And the children they have on their thing, expecting them to be on a Counter-Strike stream, are now being introduced to stake.com's gambling streams. It's a little bit more complex than that, but it's that's generally the way they're being.
Let me ask you both a question, because I can see that kids, they just watch streamers, they're very popular. Would these streamers shouldn't be responsible at some level for their own content?
So coming back to, let's look at the UK streamers now. So there's about 10, 12 quite reasonably prominent slot streamers. They all use crypto casinos, and that comes back to regulation. And so they want to use bonus buys, they want to use turbo spins, they want to use those products that they can't on UK licensed websites. They have to compete, remember, with global content creators. So how can you do that being hindered by the regulation? I have a bit of sympathy with them that they are using these things, and but they're still affiliating their players and their consumer base onto black market websites. And it's not always the crypto casinos. Some of it is the real classic no pay if you win, black market casinos. It's really dangerous. But from a business point of view, it makes no sense for them to use the regulated casinos. It just makes no sense. They would be losing money. They'd be spending more time. It just makes no sense for them. So you have to catch them on a doing the right thing basis. And I'm not sure there are too many people in the world who will always do the right thing when it comes to taking a loss in your earnings. There are some, but they are more limited than others. So I do think that the Commission needs to really get a grip of that really, really, really quickly.
Are the content creators responsible? Yes, they are, but I think practically the likelihood of us actually managing to get what are very economically driven people to put ethics before profit is very, very low. I do, however, think that we need to do a few things. We need to apply a lot more pressure to the platforms that these streamers are using. Frankly, simply saying if you have a UK audience and you are not streaming with a UK licensed casino, then you will get suspended. And it only takes a few reports to double check. Well, they didn't have that license. You didn't click the no license, so no UK traffic. You're suspended, and 3 strikes and you're out. Sort of policies. This is something that's well within the powers of the streaming platforms to do. However, I mean, I say that, and I know that the second the streaming platforms start to introduce prohibitive rules like that, what happens is another streaming platform props up that refuses to. And that's where we need to stop seeing this in a national context.
Yeah.
Regulators and governments need to start actively cooperating. This is not a country issue. This is a whole world problem. Yes. And we all need to start working to apply pressure to Google. Google should not be indexing sites that are targeting search terms like casinos not on GameStop. It just shouldn't be happening.
I agree, but we're in a time where like main platforms say, "Oh, we're going to stop censoring, or we're not going to fact check."
Yeah, we are.
So it feels a bit like, okay.
The changes in the US political sphere recently seem to have, and with purchases of certain major social media platforms, it's politicized the whole sector, and the internet is something we're going to have to develop more robust policies to manage. It's not going away anytime soon.
No, it's not. And you're right. You're absolutely right. It's a global thing. It's a global issue, not a national issue. But that's really, really hard, I think, for governments to come up with, the frameworks for that. Everyone is trying to do it nationally, and you are. I mean, I can. You're weighing into the wind, if you will, with it. So. Yeah, it's a really tough issue, but I think we will get there. I think there will be. The Gambling Commission really do seem like they're trying to get the teeth into it. I think they're petrified of the black market at the moment because regulation is pushing people there, and if they want this regulation to stick, they need to combat the black market. And the brilliant thing is, that the beautiful thing is, everyone agrees with the black market now. Even the prohibitionist kind of organisations all agree that the black market is an issue. They may differ on size and things, but they do agree that it is a problem. And the researchers and things are all kind of saying to the Gambling Commission, you need to get on top of this. So it's a
difficult question here. The regulated market here have been in the past unregulated market somewhere else. So
yeah, very true, and I think that is a problem for those markets. As in, so which markets are we talking about? Are we talking about China? Are we talking about they don't have many of them.
Just going to say, it's not just that the regulated markets here, our operators here, have been unregulated in the past. It's the fact that they are still unregulated in some jurisdictions. So, the operators who are white market in the UK are grey market in other countries, and this creates a problem. It's not. There is no clean, easy solution to all of this. And
one second. Battery's going to die on my laptop, so only 1 minute.
The more that we also have to realize and appreciate that the harder we try to fix the black market, the more that the black market is going to fight back. This is an arms race.
I think it's a bit of an impossible. So there's no solution. It's what you're saying. Would be like a co-evolution and try to minimize as much harm that we can.
That's what I was going to say. I'm not going to say there's no solution. There's no perfect fix.
Yeah.
There's no magic wand that's going to make this all go away. But what we need to keep doing and keep working on is evolving strategies to introduce layers of friction between consumers and the black market.
Guys, I realized that we're 1 hour and 15 minutes. Do we have anything that you think that we should talk about, or shall we call it an episode?
I think we can call it an episode, and if there's any questions anyone's got or anything like that, or anyone thinks of anything, they can just pop it into wherever. We'll get back to them.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Jordan, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you for being so candid and sharing what are tough conversations. I think that's valuable, and I think that helps other people gain context on their problems. I think we need to have more conversations like this.
Yeah, and this is why I think that there's lived experience. It has some benefits. It has some hindrances as well. But there is a benefit in the lived experience kind of stories, and if it can help a few people, this is why I'm here. This is why I love what I do, and I do really enjoy sharing my story in schools or on any platform. As tough as it can be at times, it's something that I think is a nice thing to do, and I really enjoy it. So thank you for giving us the platform to say it, and hopefully if anyone sees it and recognizes any of those feelings, any of those parts of that story in their own life, they'll know where they can reach out to and who can give them some support. So that's why we do what we do.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
See you later.
We need to